Disclosing documents proving surveillance at London's G20 isn't the only thing, of course, that's put Edward Snowden in the spotlight. Today, the whistleblower has, in fact, just been taking part in an online Q&A session hosted by the Guardian newspaper in Britain. RT's Sarah Firth's been listening into that. Hi, Sarah. Any more revelations come out then?
Well, you just dragged me away from Twitter because whilst that question and answer session's just finished, of course, the debate around those answers still raging. A hugely fascinating insight and a very fitting forum, I think, for the whistleblower who is behind the biggest leak in NSA history, Edward Snowden, taking part in that question and answer session. And the biggest question on everyone's lips was why Hong Kong? That's where he travelled to shortly before these surveillance, this information had surfaced, and that's what everyone wanted to know. These had revealed that US agencies had, systematically been gathering these vast amounts of phone and web data. So this was amongst the first questions that were addressed, and the answer that Edward Snowden gave was that the US government, just as they did with other whistleblowers, immediately and predictably destroyed any possibility of a fair trial at home, openly declaring me guilty of treason. That's not justice. And he went on to explain that the NSA employees had to declare foreign travel 30 days in advance and are monitored. So he needed to travel to a country with the cultural and legal framework, he'd said, to allow him to work without being immediately detained, and Hong Kong had provided that. But as we said, a huge response. There were a huge number of questions asked in this public setting where people were offered to ask him anything, and indeed he gave us as many answers as he was allowed in that time.
That meeting, that Q&A, it wasn't in Vision, was it? It was just a sound Q&A, I gather, just finished now. Of course, the world, a lot of countries in the world, furious with America. America's furious at him. What's his response? Did he say any more about why he's done all this?
Well, absolutely. That really got addressed during this question and answer session. I think a big part of the purpose was to hear his viewpoint. Of course, this is what everyone has been waiting for since those big revelations and that big leak. And he addressed very directly the question that a lot of people have put to him about the US government's response, that he's a traitor, also that he might have possibly handed over classified US information to the Chinese government. And he was pushed on that point. He gave a flat no, saying that he hadn't handed over that information and that he works with journalists. He'd also talked about his disillusionment with the Obama administration and the government, calling it a predictable smear that he'd anticipated before going public. Now, it has to be said, there were a huge number of answers there. There's a huge amount of information given. Of course, everyone's going to be combing through that now, as indeed we are, to really get to the bottom of what was said, because, of course, this is really a huge fascination for people. It was an absolutely massive leak, and he gave his response to what the media response is being, saying that initially he was very encouraged, but unfortunately the mainstream media now seems far more interested in what I said when I was 17 or what my girlfriend looks like, rather than say the largest program of suspicionless surveillance in human history. And in another answer he'd said, the truth will out. So certainly a very stark warning there from Edward Snowden, maybe a sign of things to come, because of course there's a huge amount of information that we still don't know, as all that information that he gathered during his time working for the NSA is combed through, and he made that clear in the question and answer session too. He wants to do this properly. So a fascinating debate, one that's ongoing, and of course we tell our viewers to please do join in and get in touch with their thoughts to us on our Twitter accounts.
Absolutely. As the twists and turns continue to unfold. Sarah Firth in London, thank you very much.